Section number 5 of the Rover, Volume 1, Number 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by April 6090. The Rover, Volume 1, Number 1. Edited by Seba Smith and Lawrence Labree. Section 5. Leoni, a legend of Italy. The lord of the castle, Alto, is old and grey-headed. 80 years have flitted silently over him, and the dream of his life is nigh to awakening, and his ear is dull, and his eye is dim, and his heart is weary. The old man reclines on a couch in the hall of his ancestors, beside an open casement, and the balmy air that floats over the deep blue waters of the broad sea passes softly through his thin hair, and his weary eye rests on the brightness of a lovely landscape. For the olive and the orange and the myrtle are green by the shore of the still waters, and the city lies whitely beneath the glance of the sun, as he rides through the cloudless azure of the heaven, while the purple mountains clasp the ocean in their arms, and fade away into the horizon in long lines of misty blue. Alas! The springtime of nature is a mockery to the winter of age, and Amalfiero turns away in sadness. His vassals are waiting around him to do him pleasure. The minstrel is there with his harp, the maiden with her song, but no music is so sweet to the old man's ear as the voice of his daughter, Giulietta. Giulietta, when a babe, was a thing of smiles and loveliness, like happy thoughts dancing over the mind. Giulietta, when a child, was like the orange blossom in the groves of Friuli, and gladness floated around her like the fragrance of the flower. Giulietta, in her youth, was the fairest maiden in Italy. She glanced among the myrtle bowers like the winged zephyr. The evening star, when it rises, gleaming out of the sea into the darkness of the glorious night of Italy, is not so bright as the beam that flashed from her large eye through the night of her lovely eyelashes. Giulietta's mind was love, all love, to each and every thing. Like music to the sadness of the soul, was Giulietta to the old age of her father. As she passed before him, a light came into the coldness of his eye, and his ear, when it was dead to other sounds, awoke to the murmur of her gentle voice. As an angel watches over the last days of a saint upon earth, when the tumult of the battle of his life is over, and sheds peace around his hours, and bids his day pass sweetly and holily, so Giulietta watched over Amalfiero like an influence of good, and was the sun of his thoughts and the light of his rejoicing. Giulietta had a brother. Garcio di Almafiero was a man of a dark countenance, and the shadows of his evil passed over it like clouds over the luridness of the stormy heaven, and his look withered those upon whom it fell, and his wrath, once excited, raged like a pestilence, and would not be appeased. He was loved by few, and had many enemies, none of whom he hated as he did the bandit Leoni. For him only he feared. Leoni's better nature had been borne down by the violence of his passions, and he became what was abhorred, and widely was the fear of his name spread. For he passed over the land like a meteor, and left desolation behind him in the palaces of the great and the powerful, but not in the hamlets of the poor. Returning from a successful attack on the castle of a neighboring baron, Leoni had been once traced to the fastness of the Apennines by Garcio with a chosen troop of his followers. The bandit gave him battle, and was as usual victorious. The followers of Garcio cowered back from his thunderbolt charge, and Garcio himself was struck from his horse by the sword of Leoni. It had been said of the bandit that he had never deserted a friend, nor spared an enemy, but as his saber waved over the head of his prostrate foe, the beaver of Garcio's helmet fell open, Leoni's arm was arrested as if by the hand of an invisible being, and a smile of scorn passed over his lip. Then a mildness came into his eye. He turned calmly away, and, to the astonishment of his followers, sounded a retreat in the very flesh of victory, while Garcia and his disheartened and vanquished band were suffered to retire unmolested. From that time the hatred of Garcia to Leoni was inextinguishable. The shame of defeat and the thirst of revenge gnawed into his heart like vultures, for he would rather have been laid dead by the sword of Leoni than have owed his life to the clemency of his conqueror. Giulietta sat in her chamber in the eastern tower of Castle Alto. The evening star rose out of the sea, and climbed slowly up into the sky, and Giulietta's dark eye rested sadly upon it. She was waiting for a voice that rose every evening from the myrtle grove below the castle, as that star disappeared behind the peak of a distant mountain. Giulietta hardly knew how very sweet the voice was to her listening ear, for it was the voice of one who loved her with a more than common love. They had first met when Giulietta was young, very young, and Francesco just verging into manhood. From that hour she was the light of his path and the joy of his heart. Her father knew not of his child's love for Francesco, who pleaded to Giulietta some ancient feud of their families as an excuse for maintaining his secrecy. When the star touched the misty summit of the mountain, and Giulietta drew near to the window, a blush passed over her fair cheek as a minstrel's song rose upon the breeze. She opened a secret door and descended, and Francesco saw her come forth in her beauty. "What meant thy song to-night, Francesco?" said the maiden. "What can a farewell to thee mean, Giulietta, but misery?" "Nay, this is madness, Francesco," replied the maiden. "Wherefore must we part?" "Thou sayest well, Giulietta, we will not part. Fly with me. Night is on the mountain, my band is near. Ere the day dawn we shall be far hence, in safety, in honor, and if thou wilt, in power." "Thy band!" repeated Giulietta. "Fly with thee? With whom? What meanest thou? What art thou, Francesco?" "I know not, maiden," said Francesco. "I have not been what I seem to be, yet thou couldst make me so. With thee I am Francesco, without thee I am a pestilence, a scourge. In a word, without thee I am Leoni." And the name struck through the maiden's heart with a coldness as of death. The cry she would have uttered died upon her lips, and she fainted in the arms of her lover. A hectic flush passed over her cheek, and she woke from the partial death with a deep gasp, as of one in pain, and her dark eye was filled with a vague horror. "Francesco, Francesco!" she said. "Thou toldst me something. It was terrible. Tell it me again. Francesco! Thou art not Francesco." And she paused for a moment. "I know now," she said. "I remember well, very well. Francesco is dead, and thou art not. Thou canst be. Thou shalt not be. Leoni, the bandit Leoni, my brother's enemy. Oh, Francesco, say thou mockest me." "I was once Leoni," he replied, "thy brother's enemy. Never! Or Garcia had not now lived. Could I be the enemy of your brother, Giulietta?" And Giulietta felt that it was Francisco and not Leoni who spoke, and she paused in deep agony. Great was the tumult at Castle Alto. An old fisherman of Pozzullo had informed Garcia that he had seen two figures passing down westward on the seashore at the foot of the castle. One was a maiden of exceeding beauty. The countenance of the other, he said, was one which he knew well, and which once seen was not easily forgotten, that of the bandit Leoni. Then Garcia was wild with rage, and he called his followers together, and the clash of arms was loud in the hall, and then from the gate of Castle Alto issued a troop of warriors, and their mail shone cold in the starlight, and Garcia spurred on his bloody war-horse in the van. His countenance was pale with wrath, and he dashed madly forward along the winding shore. But one of the maidens of Giulietta, when she heard the peasant's tale, went and sought for her in her father's hall, and she was not there. And she descended by the secret staircase, and she saw footsteps in the dew on the grassy ground. Then she returned weeping, and came to Almafiero, and told him that Leoni, the bandit, had carried away Giulietta. And the old man was very feeble, and he bowed his head greatly upon his breast and died. "Heardest thou nothing?" Giulietta said to Leoni. "Nothing, Giulietta," he replied. "Nay, now that I listen, methinks I hear a sound, far away, like the tramp of steeds along the sand." And Giulietta listened, and she was filled with great fear. "Oh, fly, Leoni," she said. "It is Garcia. Fly, and leave me here." But Leoni raised her in his arms and bore her softly forward. And now the rocks were seen rising high from the seashore, with the columns of a ruined temple upon their summit, and Leoni knew that his band was near. On, Giulietta!" he exclaimed. "One effort more, and we are safe." And now the tramp of the galloping horses came nearer, and the voices of men were heard urging them on. Louder and louder became the sound, and Giulietta made one last struggle forward, and having gained the rocks, the lovers stood beneath the ruins. "Anselmo! Anselmo!" cried Leoni. And he was answered by a shout from the rocks, and the banditti leaped from their concealment. But ere they gained the shore, the foremost horseman of the opposite troop dashed into view. It was Garcia. A shout of triumph burst from his lips when he saw Leoni. Giulietta saw him level his carbine, and with a shriek of agony she threw herself before Leoni and fell dead in his arms. The band of Leoni heard the shot, and were around him in an instant, and lo! their leader was standing inactive beside the body of a maiden. There was a stillness in his eye and in his features, but it was as the stillness of the volcano before it bursts forth into desolation. His troops stood around him in fearful silence, and there was a pause, until like a whirlwind over the quietness of deep waters came the madness over the soul of Leoni. He looked up and saw that his band was beside him. "Stand by me this night," he said, "and revenge the loss of your leader." Then he shouted his war cry, and the banditti swelled the sound with eager voices. The followers of Garcia replied, and Leoni dashed at them like a thunderbolt. Then loudly into the quietness of the heaven rose the roar of the battle, and the echoes rolled heavily over the sea. Leoni burst his path through the mass of battle, and his bloodshot eye was on the crest of Garcia, and whether it were foe or friend whom he met in his frenzy, he dashed the combatants aside, and clove his way to that one plume. With the implacable wrath of an avenging spirit, Leoni sought his single foe. The followers of Garcia shrunk from his glance, and as he broke through the front of their battle, some turned and fled, and the rest hung back in disorder and dismay. Then Garcia saw Leoni come upon him with the swoop of an eagle, and his eye quailed before the despair of his foe. "Wretch!" cried Leoni, "lovest thou life? Oh, would that I could make life to thee what thou hast made it to me, and thou shouldst live. I spared thee once, for her sake. Thou hast well rewarded me. Thy sister strikes thee, Garcia." And he smote him dead. And the voice of the battle drifted away toward Castel Alto, and the shouts of the victorious banditti were heard echoing along the cliffs. But Leoni was no longer at their head. In their victory they were without a leader. They remembered that he had commanded them to revenge his loss, and few, very few, of the followers of Garcia escaped the slaughter of that night. The banditti met and sought for Leoni among the dead, and they found the body of Garcia and the sword of their leader lying beside it, but him they found not, and they retired silently under cover of the night to their fastness among the mountains. Oh, calmly, brightly, beautifully rose the morning out of the eastern sea, and widely spread the rosy dawn over the deep. Gloriously the radiance stole up into the high heaven, where the white clouds waved their light wings in the deepness of the infinite blue, and looked out eastward, rejoicing as they met the morning breeze that sprang upward from its repose in the grove of silver olives. And the sun lifted its head majestically out of the sea, and the mists passed away before his glance from its surface, and the waves rolled onward, singing, with sweet low voices, and a long golden path was thrown upon them, even unto the shore. Oh, the radiance of that morning was unconscious of the desolation of the night. There was no sadness in the dawn that shone on the ruins of Castle Alto. The surges that, in the night, had dashed away the blood from the shore, now broke clear and white on the unstained pebbles. A figure was leaning against a rock on the strand. Few, very few, would have recognized in the haggard face and withered form the once haughty and fiery Leoni. The fishermen of Pozzuoli affirm that, for years after that terrible night, the same figure was seen pacing the shore, with the unequal step and wild gesture of a maniac. End of section 5.